Thank you. Hello and welcome to everyone joining us today for our webinar, How to Craft Winning Email Creative, Expert Tips and Examples. It's great to have so many of you on the phone today. It's hard to believe it's December already and a busy time of year, but we're going to address a topic that I think is near and dear to every email marketer's heart, how to make my email creative as effective as it can be. Today's agenda will cover some of the primary goals for your email messages, case studies from generous MDR customers who are willing to share with us their creative, and suggestions for how to make messages most effective. We've got a lot of great content to cover. As a reminder, all of MDR's free customer webinars are recorded, and the content from dozens of our past webinars are always available at our website, schooldata.com, so you can catch up on any that you've missed. We will make the slides and recording available to you tomorrow, and we'll send you an email as soon as they're available. Also, we will allow time for questions and answers at the end of the session, but at any time you have a question, you can submit it in the using the Q&A box in the lower right corner of your screen. So let me quickly introduce our expert panel. First up, we'll hear from Carrie Bobeczko, a marketing manager at Apperson. Carrie drove marketing strategy in the construction industry before joining Apperson, and in the last 5 years has been instrumental in driving digital marketing initiatives, including email, social media, website, and web advertising at Apperson. Carrie just wrapped up a corporate rebranding initiative, and we'll see some of the outcomes of that effort today. Also joining Carrie is Carrie Estrada, Marketing Manager of Education at Apperson. Bringing her expertise in web platform and e-commerce management to her role, Kerry came to Apperson 3 years ago and has effectively grown online help services using video, as well as weekly training webinars to support their products. Kerry is highly visible in the field and is often considered the face of Apperson. We'll also hear from Derek Fairfield, MDR's email solution leader. Derek manages our e-marketing solutions and acts as a strategic consultant for our interactive marketing customers. He also directs MDR's industry-leading digital marketing research and best practice efforts. And wrapping up the panel is Nikki, who many of you have heard from before. He's MDR's Vice President for Product Development. Chris is our Chief Strategist for Interactive Marketing and has been helping customers implement and grow their multi-channel programs for over 8 years. Chris and his team recently launched the industry's first display advertising solution that exclusively targets educators and expands MDR solutions to include the digital web advertising space. So with that, we'd love to get this panel started, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris to kick things off.
Thanks, Maura. And welcome everyone on the phone today joining the webinar. This is going to be a great session, a very interactive session, and I wanted to start off with just kind of a couple of high-level principles when looking at email creative in terms of what it's trying to accomplish and what are the outcomes and how you look at that. And I typically use these couple vantage points to really look at email creatives because I do happen to look at a lot of them on an annual basis, and it's a good place to kind of start and move from there when you get in, before you get down into the nitty-gritty about fonts and colors and things like that. But I'll start off with one of the principles here, which is the purpose of an email is to sell the click. And I have to remind myself of this because I often forget it. It's a principle that our friends at Mech Labs, Marketing Sherpa folks, Dr. Flint McLaughlin, often includes in his discussions, but that really is the purpose of an email. Be it prospect or customer, you can do so much more on your website, on your microsite, on your landing pages. So you want to kind of think of, am I putting the right amount of content in my email marketing message? Depending on what type of message it is, you can do more in obviously newsletters. Than you can sometimes in pure prospecting. But you want to think of it in the following manner. You want to move them down the funnel to conversion. The first step, obviously, is to get them to open. So the envelope, the subject, the from, the display from, those are the things that will inspire them to open, maybe to preview, And then the message itself is really designed to give them enough information, create enough relevancy and value proposition that they're going to click through to your landing page. So there's always some exceptions to this rule, and you may have some constraints on your landing pages, but this is the general rule of thumb in terms of what you're trying to accomplish in the email message. Here's an email optimization equation, and this is again from our Dr. Flynn. It can look pretty daunting because it's quite a equation, but basically this boils down to is an email effective if it's addressing the following types of things it's trying to accomplish. Number one, is it communicating a strong relevance? Is it making a connection to the person? And offering something that they align to in terms of content. Does it have an offer? Is there a value proposition that they can quickly identify with? That's kind of the what's in it for me. Is there some sort of promotion or incentive? More of a, well, I know it's valuable, but now I've really got to move on it. And these things on the left side of the equation are all the positives, which are trying to negate any potential negatives. And the message could be addressing those negatives so that they are actually removed. Some of those negatives could be friction. Is this difficult? How tough is it to do? It could be things like quick, easy, trial. That can also address some of the anxiety elements. Is this going to cost a lot? Will I get approval? Will it work? Those types of things, if you know that they are something that could possibly be a barrier to them moving down the funnel to conversion, you can address them in the message. So I like to look at this from time to time as a way to kind of ground myself in what is the message trying to accomplish. If it's trying to accomplish one or more of these types of things, and how effective is it in accomplishing those objectives. And I always fall back on to relevancy. I believe it's the number one driver with prospect email marketing. You really want to make sure you make that connection to your audience. And fortunately, unlike a lot of verticals, we have a lot of data available to us as marketers in the education vertical. MDR has a database with hundreds of attributes that you can target with and cut and segment by, and then create very relevant messaging to increase connectivity and then create a strong value proposition. And you don't want to assume an inherent value prop. This is a mistake I see very often, where with all best intentions, a marketer can just launch right into either detail about their product or detail about their company without ever opening up with, here's who we are, here's why we matter to you, and here's a value proposition, and make it very clear and very upfront in the message. You can't assume the inherent value prop, particularly when this really pertains to prospect email marketing. With a house file or a buyer list, you've already got some built in because they've purchased from you. You can assume they know who you are and your value proposition. You can speak a little bit differently. I always say, always check your relevancy by saying, so could someone, I use the example of your grandmother. Could anybody just pick this up and read and understand who you are and what the value proposition is to the reader? And it should answer, why should I read this now? I mean, it's that kind of promotional or that strong, why do I need to take time to do this? It has to give a really compelling reason. And you can utilize all the data available at you to really create strong, relevant, and compelling messages through personalization. That is to take a larger audience and break it into segments, and through dynamic content insertion or other just simple breaking out campaigns, you want to speak to these groups in sometimes in different messages. You want to test into, can that my same product be presented differently to admin people that are making the decisions, are more budget conscious, than it should be presented to the people who are using it on the front end, the teachers? Do I need to craft a message that speaks differently to these two groups, or can I get away with a single global message? More times than not, you'll find by creating that extra relevancy through personalization, you will lift the overall response rate. So that's kind of what I had just as a kind of just to set the agenda to think about when we're talking about all email creative across the board. That's what I like to do when I'm looking at email creatives. So I would now like to pass it over to Carrie and Kerry from Apperson to go through their example. Take it away.
Thank you. This is Carrie Estrada. We wanted to kind of give you a brief history of Apperson and who we are, and kind of, you mentioned earlier that recently we'd gone through a rebrand and the necessity for that. Apperson has been in business for over 55 years, and we started originally as a printing company. And a little over 20 years ago, we got into the education space. And with that, there is a huge shift. And so we have a company that basically has two main lines that does different things. And so we found that our messaging was getting somewhat blurred. And with that in mind, we sat down and decided, we need to do something that makes people really understand when they see Apperson and they see the Apperson Datalink brand, what should they be thinking about? What should they initially, as soon as they see that, go, oh, okay, I know exactly what they do. Apperson's in the education space, and here's who they are. And so during the rebrand, it was really key for us to be able to very quickly let people know what it is that we do. So we came up with a statement that, as you see here, that Apperson creates smart, friendly, and affordable solutions for assessing performance and measuring success. Datalink test scanners, answer sheets, and reporting software digitally capture data from paper assessments, providing immediate information for instruction. So that became our working mantra. So anything that we do, we need in our marketing pieces, we always try to make sure that it ties back to this. Since the rebrand, we're like, okay, does it fall in line with quickly and clearly telling people what we do, what we offer, and how we apply to the education space? And before we had our rebrand, we had some very mixed messaging. We had so much going on in our pieces that we couldn't really pinpoint as we were looking at it. Okay, what is our main message? What are we wanting the person to see? And so with that, here's an example of one of our earlier collateral pieces that we would send through email. And you'll see here there's a lot of good information here, but there's too much information. And we were finding that as we were sending these in our email campaigns, we weren't getting the click-through rates. We weren't getting the response that we thought we should be. And we thought, well, we're showing reports, we're telling them what we do, but there were a lot of problems here. Number one, we had mixed messaging. You can't give everyone every single bullet point of what you do in one email. It's too hard for them to read, and it's too cumbersome for them to go through that messaging. The other problem is we now look back in retrospect and we see this, we're like, we don't have a clear call to action. You can't look at this page and know, oh, okay, here's what they do, this is what they're offering, this is my next step. You spend so much time getting lost in the messaging that we thought, wow, this needs some help. And so luckily with the rebrand, with getting a new identity for the company, to really pinpointing where we are in the education field and what message we're trying to send, we were able to relay that in a different way with customers. We wanted to make sure that they understood at a glance what we were doing, and to make sure that the images are what told the story. So once we've gone through the rebrand, you can see here, we wanted to make sure that people understood right away, where is your call to action? That was a really big part of it, because that's the whole reason we're sending an email, right? We want to get you this information, but then we want you to take action as well. So we have our proposition statement at the top, so it's very clearly defined as to what we're going to do. Then there's the offer, and then at the bottom we try to make it stand out very clearly what the call to action is and what they're going to get from that. With this new approach, we have had extremely good click-through rates. Our campaigns have just been amazing since the change. It's night and day difference. I can't even, really speak to that enough, because it's a targeted message, and that's the one thing to keep in mind when you are doing your email collateral, is that one email, one main message. You can't tell everybody your entire company life story in one message and in one touch. So that's something that you can create over time. But so one message, one email. The other thing to keep in mind is that you want to limit the text on the page, whereas the other version was very text-heavy. People don't want to read that much. And so you want to use your graphics as much as possible. But a key factor in doing that is making sure that you have your proper HTML coding. So text is actually text and images are actually images. If you don't have your HTML coding done properly, then the first thing is it could get caught in a spam filter because everything comes up as an image. The other problem is that it'll come through with a red X, because if they have image suppression on, they will not see any of your messaging at all. They're going to get a data box with a red X indicating something should be there, but they're not seeing anything, and that's really ineffective in your marketing to not have them even see any of your copy so that they know what you're trying to offer them. The nice thing about this, and some things that we've done with MDR, is we've done single campaigns, but more often than not what we're trying to do now is trigger campaigns. And this was one template that we recently used in a trigger campaign, and I can't say enough about the benefits of a trigger campaign. The nice thing is it allows you to test messaging, because we all know that if you get an email with a dud of a subject line and it's something that does not appeal to you and you don't feel that you have a need to open it, you won't do it. And so with trigger campaigns, you can have that first message in your subject line with your first template, and if it doesn't appeal to that person, they're going to get another touch, and with that touch, it gives you the opportunity to change that messaging. So now maybe my first message didn't resonate with you, but I've tweaked it enough in the second one that now that you're seeing how this may apply to you, and you open it and you engage with our messaging. So it's really beneficial to be able to do a trigger campaign because it gets them a multiple touch with your branding and with your message. And it also gives you an opportunity to test different things. That's the one thing that we've learned a lot in doing email marketing is if the first thing that you try doesn't work, tweak it, change it, alter it, and see what's going to work. And the nice thing is that especially with the feedback that we get through our email campaigns, with getting our hot leads and getting our click-throughs and seeing who's interacted with our message, we see this is what's working, this is what's resonating with people, and this one isn't so much. And so it gives you the opportunity to change that. And that's the one thing that we've really started to do a lot more is play with subject lines and making sure that we're trying to really hit the target on that. And you know, if it doesn't work the first time, you can try it again and try to find out what works for you and with your business. So hopefully that helps out, and I'll go ahead and pass that off to Moira for our next part.
Yeah, Chris, I think you're going to jump in a little bit here.
Yeah, I was just going to make one comment. Thanks, Kerry. I mean, I was struck when you're in your discussion of the before and after the two creatives that a couple of the best practices we've talked about already are already at play here. I mean, I think you really did a great job of rethinking the purpose of the email message, which was to sell the click. We started off with that. And in the first approach, it was doing a lot of communicating of different things, like you said. And in the second approach, it was really getting to the core value proposition, creating that relevancy to the audience, which is making sure they understand that this is a great solution for their teachers to get this type of assessment done. And then you have a promotional offer, adding the incentive piece. So I think it was a great example of how thinking about your messages in that light really can pay off. I also think you touched on a couple of great best practices in that we obviously recommend testing. That's very, very, very classic best practice and very important to do. And we all know how difficult it is to do. So trying to find ways in which you can effectively test, such as using triggers or A/B split and roll, those types of things will all pay dividends if you can go through the effort to plan it out a little bit in advance. So I think that was a great example, and I thank you for giving us an opportunity to check it out.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, it was really just a great example of a before and after and how a fresh approach to creative can really impact your results. What we're going to do next is take a look at another prospecting email, this time from Time for Kids. To introduce this project, I'd like to welcome Peter Giordano, Marketing Manager at Time for Kids and Sports Illustrated Kids. Peter develops their new customer acquisition and retention programs and is joining us today to provide a little background on this test he ran with MDR. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, everybody. So I just wanted to give a little background on kind of what Time for Kids is and what the purpose of this test was, just to give a little context, and then I'll throw it back to Chris, and he can lead the discussion and critique of our email creative. So Time for Kids is a classroom magazine designed to introduce students to nonfiction content, and it does come in 4 specific grade level targeted editions to speak to the appropriate grade level of those students, everywhere from kindergarten up through grade 6. Furthermore, our upper 2 editions have the opportunity to add an additional geography supplement that we call Around the World. That's published 6 times throughout the year, and that just brings sort of additional information about kids and their cultures from different countries around the world into the classroom. In addition to the sort of student copies, included in a subscription are teacher's guides that come with every issue, tips on teaching to the Common Core standards, worksheets, quizzes, and then a whole bunch of extra information for the teachers that lives behind a paywall on timeforkids.com. That also includes access to a free interactive digital edition that teachers can use and hook up to their interactive whiteboards to really bring the print magazine to life at the front of the classroom with extra videos and slideshows and all those sorts of things as the students follow along with their paper copies. So the campaign that we're talking about today was a prospecting email campaign. TFK, historically, we do a lot of renewal emails, but we really wanted to test the idea of using email as a new customer acquisition tool. And we decided to use sort of a similar methodology that we do for our traditional direct mail for this email campaign in terms of targeting schools to send this email to for this test. And just in general, what we sort of hope to learn in the short term, we really want to learn if email is showing some life as a viable channel for new customer acquisition for Time for Kids. Eventually, maybe we'll think about how email and direct mail sort of play off each other, if there are certain types of customers who are more responsive to one versus the other, and how they can, complement each other more holistically. And just the one challenge that, we anticipated with email is that because Time for Kids is a fairly, it has a lot of different aspects to a subscription. Our direct mail package typically has a lot of extra flyers and detailed information and sample issues so the teacher or the recipient can really kind of experience it and sample it and see what we have to offer. That's obviously a little more challenging in email, so that's one thing that we wanted to just kind of keep in mind if we can convey all of that information as effectively through the email channel. So that's who we are and what we did, and I'll hand it back to Chris to lead the discussion.
Great, thank you, Peter. This was an interesting challenge. One of the challenges I thought that was interesting from the standpoint that you traditionally did not do a lot of prospecting with email, and this you did a lot of remarketing or renewal. So this is a typical challenge, and it's one that we encounter a lot. Is that when you're making that transition from thinking about your creative from marketing to people who know you or have the relationship to marketing to people who don't. That's why we stress a lot of these things, because we're really focused on making sure that you're putting your best foot forward when you're prospecting. And I also know that through discussing with you, you guys have definitely a very well thought through list segmentation strategy. You brought to the table to MDR your own decile model score on your prospect list, which we were able to implement across our email. So I think that's a very sophisticated approach, and we applaud that. We obviously would say that you want to take a look at your segmentation strategy when you're going to prospects, and we can help you do that by taking a look at who your customers look like, and then trying to find key attributes that we should hone in on from a segmentation standpoint when you're prospecting to try to get the best lift out of your efforts. But turning to your creative, I'm going to basically say that I think it's a very impressive and great-looking creative. It's got a really impressive graphics and visuals. The messaging is fairly clean. It doesn't have a ton of stuff. It does have a few things going on, but it's fairly clean, particularly at the top. It's to the point. There's kind of the that matrix of email optimization is kind of falling into the ease of use, the reducing friction, is make your school year easier. The subject line was try, time for kids in the classroom, so it kind of makes it sound, it makes it very inviting to give it a try. And the great thing about time for kids is that it leverages the brand recognition of time. So people have a bit of an inherent value prop, but again, I always stress not to assume that they know exactly how this can fit in their current schedule and how it might work. So there is a line under that second big graphical for targeted issues. It basically says a must for a busy teacher, a great engaging way to provide students with nonfiction reading. So it hammers in kind of like why this matters to them in the classroom. So it falls into those some relevancy there and some promotion a little bit further down with the multiple discount. Going back to just check. Oh, sorry. Going to the landing page. This is one of the things I also mentioned, is that you shouldn't utilize the email to sell 100%. And in this case, the email does actually do quite a bit of selling. And through discussions, Peter, with you, I understand that this was kind of the legacy and way in which your emails have worked, because of the fact that most of the time you were doing a renewal effort, and people got it. They understood it, and they have already been through it, so that the landing page was really just an order form. And you and I discussed that it would definitely be worth a test, or considering a test, to play with the landing page in such a way that, because this is prospecting, they may need a little bit more oomph to get them over the top on when they hit this form. You could envision a landing page where you had the form kind of in a frame, and some additional materials around the side, like sample digital issues or more information about the free stuff that they get with the whiteboard and the instructor copy, etc. And enforcing a few more of the relevancy key points of aligning to Common Core standards, etc. So overall, I think that the two worked well together, but a best practice would be to try to test a landing page, and A/B landing page testing is very effective and something I would stress. You really can get a lot of lift if you think about the whole process and all the conversion points. You can really, if you've got a decent open rate and the click-through rate, the conversion rate, if you move the needle on that, sometimes it can really have the strongest payout. You want to look at all of them and see where you're strong and where you're weak, and focus on each one individually and test to improve each one. But landing page a lot of times can be dollar for dollar a very high ROI tweak. Turning to the message itself, and I'm going to go back to a theme that Carrie mentioned at the end of her discussion, so the proposition here is what messaging did 7 out of or 8 out of 10 educators see upon initially opening this email? And the answer to that is basically try time for kids in your classroom. And I say that only because of the fact that we know through our studies, our digital trends report that we put out annually, that 7 out of 8 educators report not being able to see images when they open an email from an unknown sender, when they're at their institution email address, when they're in the school opening their school-based email. And this can have different impacts on your message. Obviously, if you're prospecting and you don't have a very strong recognizable brand, this can really, really impact you. You don't have any opportunity to basically get any more messaging out than simply your subject line. So this may not have been as harmful or did not hurt as much, because time for kids, time has such a strong brand recognition, and people understand basically what they bring to the table, at least an initial impression. So they're probably more likely to click and download the images and get a little bit more of what the offer is. But you don't want to leave it to chance, particularly in prospecting. So, I would definitely consider testing this creative versus something like Kerry mentioned, that has a mix of text and graphics. So, some other points I would definitely recommend would be to consider maybe using some teaser text at the top. Teaser text is generally, if you have a heavy first section, a banner, or some sort of heavy top portion of the email, you put a single line or a small little snippet of that really kind of works with the subject line to communicate your value proposition and create relevancy. This helps not only in prospecting email, but it helps scan factor all in general. It helps people with preview panes and they're looking through their box, and it helps on mobile. So it's something I would suggest thinking about. Alt tags. You definitely want to make sure that you have some relevant messaging in your alt tags. I know alt tags, you have to consider how they're rendered on different email clients. They render differently, but generally you have some ability to put something in there that maybe gets some points across that they'll maybe read and utilize. And again, they will show up in preview panes, particularly on mobile. And we'll talk about that later. So you want to look for a mix of text and graphics. Speaking about mobile, I think this creative rendered very well on mobile, and we'll hear a little bit later about the stats on mobile. It's definitely becoming something you need to consider as creating great email copy. You want to make sure that it does, in fact, do a decent job of getting your message across on mobile. And I think this one does. I really particularly like the fact that the main call to action and the main kind of make your school year easier is right at the top. The only thing that may be a little bit challenging here is some of the other copy, since this is all images, they're not going to auto-size or auto-scale. Some of the copy that's in the body may be a little small unless there's you do some pinch zoom type of drill down. A way to kind of look at what's going on in your email creative in terms of where people are clicking around, kind of get a heat map visual. I don't know if people are familiar with the campaign analyzer report that you get standard on every MDR campaign, but one of the great tools are this if you look in the track link section, there's a button called, or a link called visualize results. When you click on that, you'll get a graphical representation of the creative with where they click. These little color-coded boxes next to it will show you where people are clicking around, and this can definitely give you some, and your email designer, some ideas of where there's space being utilized or space not being utilized properly from where they're clicking. And to reinforce the point that there may be some image suppression impact on this message, the top, very, very top link, which is a click here to view this as a web page, which we generally don't see getting, the predominant traffic of an email, the predominant activity in the email message, that outperformed all the other links in the message by a 3 to 1 ratio. It was 3 times more click than any other link in the message. And then after that, so that would definitely give you some you'd want to try to test a not so image laden message just to see if you put some of this text, this copy, like particularly that headline, in HTML text and had it in a box by itself, they'd at least be able to read that without downloading anything. You can do some things to get some more of the messaging across, and I would definitely recommend testing an A/B side by side on that premise. After that, I think if they did download the message or click through, it was a fairly well laid out message in terms of it wasn't too long. They scrolled down, and the call to action at the bottom of the message, which really wasn't that far of a scroll, was actually higher in CTR than the one at the top. So that means they took the time to go through it. It's compelling enough once they did see it. So I think that utilizing these visual maps of where they're clicking can give you some clues and give you some ideas for testing one creative against a control. So again, just to kind of summarize the key takeaways on that, and the main point I really kind of are focusing on here is the image suppression factor, and that you can definitely create emails that survive it, and just knowing what to do is half the battle. You want to create a mix of HTML and text graphics. As Kerry mentioned, you want to have a nice ratio of the two so that some value prop comes across. Don't put anything in a graphic that's not also somehow stated in the email itself. That really means anything of real high importance, including offers, etc. You can always test it to yourself and recommend doing that. If your email client doesn't do it for you, you can create a Hotmail account and put the creative in it and send it to yourself. That'll be an unknown sender to your regular email box, and you'll see how it looks when it comes in. You can use tables and background images. And I'm going to show you a couple examples real quick in a second. of how you can kind of make good-looking creatives, even though they are not images, they kind of look like images, and you can do this in a manner to make sure that it survives image suppression. And again, I would definitely recommend testing out using teaser text or something of that, something along those lines to kind of get your first couple of main value proposition statements across at the top of the message. So just a high-level version of what I'm talking about here is you've got two messages kind of side by side. Obviously, the one on the right is similar in that has very little text other than it's just mostly image blocks. It probably looks really great when it's rendered, but why take that extra step? Why force your readers to, you've already got them to convert by opening, so they read something in the subject line that made them open. Now they have to take an extra step. So you're relying on that subject line and the sender to drive that second conversion. Where on the one on the left, you have its images are suppressed on both of these. On the one on the left, you've got a mix of HTML and graphics. It probably looks a lot better with a nice header once it's downloaded. But on the top, you've got join us for a free webinar and a teaser text. You got your mobile and web versions. So between the subject line, how to optimize leads and conversions, and the teaser text at the top, you've pretty much got what the entire message says. Now the message goes on to list the speakers, give you some more bullet points which continue to drive the relevancy and value, but you've got it at the top between those two. If those are strong, they're going to lead you through the message. And now the Register Now button is actually not a button, the yellow and red graphic. It's simply a table with some background coloring so that it survives image suppression. So it's kind of just a high-level graphical representation of some tricks you can do. And this is just, this is getting into the nitty-gritty of the HTML here, so I'm not going to stay too far down in the weeds, but you can see here there are lots of tricks, and we have a host of information on our website, schooldata.com. You can come and check it out. But we have a lot of techniques for creating image messages that survive image suppression. These table kind of techniques are very common, where the button in the red on the top is really a table with 3 cells. The graphic on the top and the bottom of the middle cell are not present when images are blocked, but the middle cell does come through, and that's the call to action, and it's clickable, and it's in text. So in the case of the bottom button, which is, again, a rounded kind of graphical-looking button, nothing shows up when graphics are turned off. So, and they don't even have an opportunity to click through. So you want to think about these tips, challenge your HTML designers to think about them because they're definitely worthwhile doing so in terms of what you can possibly get. And just one more, to look at this from one more lens, I'm going to ask Derek Fairfield to talk about mobile.
All right, thanks, Chris. So just to hit a couple points on the mobile rendering and to think back to that message, one of the nice things about the Time for Kids email is on a mobile device, things weren't too crowded. So you didn't have a lot of HTML links right next to each other that are hard to click with a thumb on a mobile device. And we've got some nice best practices in a MDR guide for mobile email marketing that's on our website that goes through a lot of the specific specs you need to consider when sending emails that are going to be read on a mobile or a handheld device. So just to kind of recap a few points here, the teaser text, I'm going to show some examples of that on our next creative. Image sizing, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. You need to understand when certain mobile operating systems are going to, change the scaling and the sizing. And then the scan factor. I think even more important, when folks are viewing emails, or websites for that matter, on a mobile device, they're probably scanning through it even quicker. We know folks triage their inbox using their mobile device. Folks are also going through those emails and not kind of coming back to the ones that they keep in their inbox. So that scan factor is, is very important. And I'm going to hit on that actually in our next example. So for our final creative review today, we're going to go through an example submitted to us from Pittsco. And, several brave companies submitted examples to us for today's webinar, and we selected Pittsco's email as the one to review. And I'd like to specifically thank the folks over there, and specifically Ashley, just for volunteering and also giving me enough background and examples and details so I could really speak kind of articulately to what the specific Pizzo campaign included. So just to tell you a little bit more about Pizzo, they're a very impressive company. I've actually been to visit them. They've been around for years and have become a leader in the STEM space and offer a really interesting array of products, a lot of hands-on science kits, and really fun stuff when you talk about marketing. They have the kind of product set that really, I think, captures interest and really comes across well in email. So this is going to be a good example to go through. So why don't we go to the next slide and talk about their specific campaign. So this campaign is a little bit different than the others. We've today talked pretty much exclusively about email prospecting, and we're going to kind of change gears a little bit and talk about a campaign that actually went out to a customer base. And we'll talk about the specifics about what the differences are in terms of emailing customers versus prospects in just a second. But let's talk about the objectives of this particular campaign. Pizco's overall objective was to drive customer engagement, and they've been using social media, using Facebook to encourage their customers to submit photos, enter contests about how they've used some of their kits. In turn, what they're seeing is a healthy following on Facebook, growing that base, getting folks to give them their email address on Facebook, and so that's kind of their strategy for this campaign in particular. Their overall kind of methodology has been one time a month, about on a monthly basis, to email their customer base. And that shows a lot of diligence, I think, on their part, that they've recognized that they don't want to email too much to their existing customer base. Their strategy, like I said, has been to use Facebook. And another kind of side benefit is that they're seeing the winners kind of go off on their own and update their own blogs or off their own websites, write up a nice kind of PR blog or comments about how cool it was to use the Pizco product, and they're getting a lot of kind of residual buzz around the campaigns, in this one in particular. So before I get into the actual creative review portion, I just wanted to hit on this important difference of prospecting versus email marketing to customers. So as I mentioned, the previous examples were prospecting campaigns. This one was to the Pizco customer file, which included also folks who registered on the Facebook page, folks who've attended exhibits and trade shows, etc. But some of the things to really keep in mind is that as Chris mentioned earlier, with anxiety and friction, when you're prospecting, there's overall going to be more obstacles to get that person to click, which is really one of the main goals here of the email. In prospecting, there may be little or no relationship with the brand. In Time for Kids, example, as Chris mentioned, that's a well-known brand, so that obstacle, goes down a little bit. In prospecting, the relevancy and value prop of the email becomes a much more important thing to get across. And the way you measure success is also going to be different. So, this example, it doesn't really follow a lot of those obstacles because there's an established relationship. They're either the recipients of the Pizco email we're going to look at on the next slide are either customers purchasing or have raised their hand in some way, whether it's on Facebook or at a trade show. So Pizco has a little bit more leeway, but I still think overall, there's some best practices. Before I go to the next slide, I just wondered if Kerry or Carrie at Apperson would just give us some examples of some of the differences that they find when they're communicating to customers or prospects.
Sure. Some of the main differences, like you just spoke to, are the fact that when you're sending a campaign to your own customer, you can know that they already know who you are. They've already interacted with you. They are familiar with what you do. So you can adjust your message accordingly, which is nice because instead of, meeting someone for the first time and doing an introduction, you're now old friends and you can have this other conversation. So you can tweak your messaging accordingly. Whereas when you are prospecting, it's different. It is more formal. It's more introductory. It's letting them know who you are and how they benefit from working with you and why they would want to work with you, as opposed to carrying on that other conversation. And so it's key to keep that in mind when you're doing your two different types of pieces, because the nice thing about doing your messaging to your customers is it's more relaxed, and it allows you to take your conversation to the next level. Maybe they're using a part of what you offer, and now you're adding something onto it. So it makes sense because you've already built that foundation as opposed to starting from the ground up. So sometimes customer campaigns are a little easier to put together, and usually we have a higher rate of return for click-throughs and interaction because they're very familiar with the brand and what you do, and you don't have to have that introductory conversation. But it's nice, it's fun because you can do two different types of pieces completely, depending on who your market is.
Great. Thanks for that commentary. Okay, why don't we take a look at this campaign? Again, so this was a campaign that was sent out actually back in May. And their overall goal, as a reminder, was to really drive submissions to Facebook to try to win a contest. So my overall impressions here, are that they did a really nice job incorporating their brand without having to really kind of repitch it to their existing customers. I think the concept is very engaging in terms of visual. So using a bridge kit, which you see on the left, paired next to an image there of the Golden Gate is just a really nice way to kind of draw people in and get that interest and reinforce the engagement into hopefully getting folks to click through to drive the goal of the campaign. One of the things I noticed when I first looked at this was free gift just jumped out at me, in a very kind of loud, bold way there in the bottom right. And so, that's always a compelling offer. And so they did a good job there. One of the things that kind of when I understood more about the campaign is that free gift for orders of $250 or more is really not connected to the Facebook campaign. So that's going to be one of my comments as kind of I go through, just offer some recommendations for going forward. So some of the recommendations I have, and folks here who've taken the time to kind of understand the campaign and look at this, include, kind of even before looking at the email, is considering the list that we're going out to. So in this case, they're sending to their entire customer base monthly, which is fine. But there may be some other opportunities to drive sales, to drive interest or engagement by going after specific subsets or targets. If folks are interested in one product line versus another, for example. Some of the tactical things about the email campaign, again, remembering what the overall goal is. We see the navigation bar at the very top, sustainable energy, aerospace, et cetera. If your goal is really to drive interest into one thing, I generally recommend against including that. Again, this is to customers, so you have a little more leeway. I would say if this was a prospecting email, to not include opportunities for folks to kind of deviate from what you're trying to get them interested in. But again, you have more leeway with customers. So that was one comment. I mentioned the free gift really jumping out at me, and that the Q2 scholarship winner. So again, if your goal is specifically to drive a campaign, I think we could tone that down a little bit. Not that they're not important things, but there's potentially other opportunities to maybe include those as links or kind of de-emphasize them, make them less bold, less in your face. Potentially adding a deadline and personalizing. So with customers, you're going to have some data points on folks, and as Chris has mentioned and we've mentioned earlier, we could potentially use either content insertion or other ways to personalize the emails. And then we get into some of the specifics around the design. And in this case, just by knowing and getting some of the details, this was sent out using a email service provider that has templates. And you can't necessarily tell from looking at this, but there's a lot of images going on here, very similar to the last example, not a lot of HTML text. So if the images don't render and are suppressed, you're not going to see much. In this case, that was understood. The template that their provider offered did not really support HTML that well, and they were finding that it did not render well. So they made the conscious decision, knowing that their customers, that they're going to get a much more engagement, much higher open rate, to go with an image that was or go with an email that was all images. So that's the kind of decision that I think can be made when you know all the details, especially again to the customer base. Okay, so I'm going to move on. We're going to take a couple of looks at how things kind of render on mobile devices, and then we're going to wrap it up. So Chris has mentioned the teaser text, the preview text. I just wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit. It makes an impact, especially on mobile devices. Right here, this is actually a screenshot of my Outlook, kind of a before and after. And this is not exactly how the Pisco campaign came across. I just kind of doctored it up for today's webinar just to show that it can make an impact. So the top is kind of plain vanilla without really any compelling preview or teaser text, and the bottom is. And I think folks are in such a rush and going to take so little time to look at your email that between the subject line and that teaser text, you do have an opportunity to get incremental open. So by using it, as you can see here, I think you'd be much more likely to take an interest to the bottom example. Looking at the same thing on, this is a screenshot of my iPhone, same thing. So, again, I think we've kind of made this point several times, but I just wanted to kind of show it in action and encourage folks to see it. I know on the emails we deploy, a lot of folks are using the option to view the email as a web page, which I think is definitely a best practice. But I think I'd like to see more folks really start to take advantage of using the preview or teaser text to help drive their open rate. You also need to just be cognizant and understand, what mobile devices are out there and how emails will render. So we have kind of a before and after on an Android device. The default on Android devices is to not render images. And so you can see on the left side how that comes through. Again, if you use that teaser text, you'll see that under, at the top of the message under the subject line. The alt text, which Chris mentioned earlier, you see the word bridges came through. If that was, enter to win a contest, maybe a little more copy, you're going to get folks more likely to click the show pictures button, which will load the images, which you see on the right. So again, kind of making the same points, but trying to show it in different ways. Also, on Android devices, it does not auto-scale. So it's not going to auto-scale to get to the width of the entire email. So it's, in this case, I would have to kind of scroll around. So as long as you're aware of that and you test that on your emails when you're before you deploy your campaigns. So the next screen is kind of showing how it auto-scales on the iPhone platform. So here we can see that it's scaled down, so I see the width of the email. I still have to scroll vertically, but it's just something that you need to be aware of. Also, the iOS platform will automatically load images, so you don't have that image suppression issue there. And the reason this is important is because more and more educators are accessing and viewing emails and going beyond just viewing emails, clicking through on mobile devices. So this is an example of one of the stats from our last Digital Trends Report, which launched last April 2012. So over 40% of teachers are looking at emails on their wireless mobile device. And I expect that number is going to really pop up in the 2013 report, which will come out next spring. In terms of what specific devices they're using, we're really seeing it get pretty close to the iOS and Android platform in terms of the phones. Tablets really grew a lot. You don't run into the same kind of real estate challenges that you do on the phones, but I think, we're going to continue to really try to keep you informed. As I mentioned, we have the best practices guide, and we'll just continue to have a lot of information on this because it's really, a growing segment. Okay, so just key takeaways, and then I think we'll wrap it up. Be consistent in customer emails. One of the nice things about the Pitsco email is, that they are aware of and trying to use templates. So you can, just be consistent where your main message goes, where your kind of secondary messages. In the Pitsco case, it was, the free gift for orders and winners for each quarter for scholarships. So try to be consistent, then customers can kind of understand where things are. One of the things I loved about our first example from Apperson was their comments about testing. So I think you should always improve, your email performance by testing, whether that's subject line testing, whether that's, slight differences. You try using preview text and teaser text and try not using it. Try content differences, et cetera. So test everything whenever possible. And so then the last two kind of more of comments is, how are you following up with your leads or your best customers? Again, the Apperson example was great. They talked about trigger marketing and following up with folks that have opened, putting them into a lead funnel. Are you using the free hot leads that come with the MDR deployed campaigns? How are you following up with your best customers that open your emails? And then lastly, just owning your content. And what I mean about that is really just understanding how your content renders, how the reader's impacted by the decisions you make, and how can you seek to improve it time over time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Derek. Obviously, there's an awful lot to say about this topic. I think we've kind of run right through our typical question and answer period. We did have 4 or 5 questions here, some which are very specific, and we will follow up with you right after the session. But I would like to make a special thank you to our customers from Apperson, Time for Kids, and Pitsco for sharing their creative with us today so we can all learn from them. Chris and Derek, as usual, thanks for your help. And, we appreciate you joining us for a session like this. We'll be bringing you more of them in the new year. We'll be focusing on social media, funding, and more marketing best practices. So visit schooldata.com and watch your email for more invitations. We are doing something a little different this session. We're sending the feedback survey right after this session, so if you can look for it and give us a little feedback, let us know what worked, share ideas for new things. And that'll wrap it up for today. Thanks very much. Have a great holiday season and a Happy New Year.